Spring in the western countryside always smelled like new beginnings, chalk dust, wild daisies, and the restless dreams of the young. Jane was 18, a student at the local teacher training college. She was bright-eyed, hopeful, with ink-stained fingers and a heart that believed love could last forever. Then came Steve. He was tall, confident, with a grin that could make the world pause for a heartbeat. Their first meeting felt like a line written by fate itself. He told her, half teasing, half serious, "Jane, when I look at you, I see my future wife." She laughed, brushing back a strand of hair. "You'd better get used to waiting, Mr. Dreamer. I'm still figuring out how to handle a class of 5-year-olds. Their laughter echoed through the courtyard, light, pure, and untouched by the weight of time. They didn't yet know that promises made under spring sunlight don't always survive the winters that follow. A year later, life pulled Steve away. He had earned a scholarship overseas, a chance at bigger dreams. He promised it would be quick, no more than 2 years. 2 years, Jane. That's all. Then I'll come back, and we'll start our life. She believed him. 2 years, she whispered. I'll wait. The morning he left, the train hissed as white smoke curled above the platform. He kissed her hand one last time, and then he was gone, leaving her standing there, holding a letter that smelled of ink and forever. At first, the letters came faithfully. Long pages filled with stories about faraway cities she couldn't pronounce, and plans for a future built just for them. Jane read each one by lamplight, whispering his name between paragraphs as though it might keep him close. But over time, the letters slowed. Months passed. Then years. The ink that once carried his love began to fade. People told her it was time to let go. He's not coming back, they said. But Jane held on. He said he would. Some promises just take longer. So she waited, through changing seasons, through birthdays spent alone, through the laughter of children who grew and left while her own heart stayed frozen on that station platform. 12 years passed before Steve finally returned. But he was no longer the boy she had waited for. Life had carved new lines across his face. His eyes carried distance. Jane saw him one rainy afternoon outside the cafe near the college gates. "Steve?" she asked softly. He turned, managing a small, uncertain smile. "Jane, you look different." 12 years will do that, she said. They spoke like strangers trying to find the rhythm of a song they'd long forgotten. And though they smiled, though they spoke of old times, something between them was gone. 2 weeks later, the news came. Steve had married another woman. That night, Jane sat alone by the window, listening to the soft rain against the glass. She finally understood. Love could cross oceans and still drown. In the months that followed, heartbreak wrapped her in silence. But beneath that silence was a secret. She was pregnant. It was a fragile promise of the love she had once believed in. Fate, however, can be cruel. Before the baby had a name, she lost it. "Was I waiting for love," she whispered, "or for heartbreak?" Days blurred into one another, gray skies, untouched tea, and an ache that refused to fade. Yet, even in sorrow, Jane kept teaching. When life broke her heart, she taught others how to find theirs. Years went by. The lines on her face deepened, not from age, but from lessons learned too soon. She became one of the most respected teachers in her district, gentle, wise, quietly admired. The girl who once waited for love had become a woman who no longer chased what was meant to return on its own. Still, life wasn't done with her. It rarely is. For every ending, it seems, there is a new beginning waiting to bloom. And though Jane didn't yet know it, her next chapter was already on its way, written not in the ink of old promises, but in the soft, steady rhythm of hope returning. When spring returned to the western countryside, it came quietly, a gentler kind of season, as though the earth itself had learned to breathe slower. Jane had stopped waiting for miracles by then. Her life had folded neatly into the rhythm of her small world, the school, her students, her quiet evenings by the window. She had grown used to the company of silence. But silence, sometimes, is where new beginnings take root. It happened one morning outside the school gate. She was watching her pupils chase each other across the yard when a dusty car stopped by the fence. A man stepped out, tall, weathered from the sun, holding a set of rolled blueprints. His smile was unsure, almost shy. He asked if she was the head teacher. She smiled, brushing her palms against her skirt. "You're looking at her," she said, amused. "Or at least, the one who gets to decide where you dig." That small moment, a smile shared between strangers, was how it began. Not with fireworks or promises, but with laughter quiet enough to fit in the palm of a morning. His name was Michael. He was a surveyor sent to supervise the building of a new classroom block. He spoke little, but when he did, there was steadiness in his voice, the kind that made people feel safe. He saw the world through maps and measurements, through lines and quiet certainties. Over the following weeks, he and Jane crossed paths often, between lesson plans and foundation markings, between coffee breaks and afternoon chats under the jacaranda tree. He admired the calm way she guided her students. She admired how he never rushed through silence. He told her once that she had a kind of peace about her, the kind only people who had weathered storms could carry. She told him that peace wasn't about escaping storms at all, but about learning to dance in the rain. And for the first time in years, Jane laughed without looking over her shoulder. As the months unfolded, so did their friendship. It was gentle, unhurried, like sunlight creeping across a cold floor. He began staying longer after work, helping her carry books, sharing stories about his travels, and listening to hers. There was a warmth between them, quiet, unspoken, but alive. Then, one afternoon, the past came knocking again. It was a letter, the kind of letter she once waited years to receive. The handwriting was familiar. Steve's. He wrote of regrets, of broken dreams, of the mistakes that had cost him everything. He said he'd never stopped thinking of her, that he hoped she could forgive him. Jane read the letter in silence. Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart didn't. She folded it neatly, placed it in the drawer beneath her old lesson notes, and closed it without another word. Not out of anger, but peace. Some love stories, she realized, aren't meant to end in forever, only in lessons. That evening, as she walked home under the fading light, she felt lighter than she had in years. The past no longer clung to her. It had finally set her free. Michael, too, carried his own shadows. He had once been married, a love cut short by loss. His wife had died young, leaving him with 3 children and a heart afraid to start again. He told Jane this one evening as they sat beneath the stars after a long day at the school site. He spoke softly, without pity. "I never thought I'd find room for someone else," he admitted. "But when I see you with those children, the way you care for them, I realize love isn't about starting over. It's about continuing with someone who understands where you've been." Jane smiled, a real smile, warm and steady. "Then maybe," she said, "we're both still learning how to continue." And just like that, 2 weary hearts began to find rhythm again. The night he proposed wasn't one of grand gestures. There were no candlelit dinners or fancy speeches, just the 2 of them sitting outside, the sky draped in quiet stars, the world humming softly around them. Michael hesitated before speaking, his voice low and a little nervous. "I don't have perfect words," he said. "But I know this, I want to spend what's left of my life making yours softer." For a long moment, Jane said nothing. She looked up at the stars, remembering all the years she had spent waiting for love that never returned. Then she turned to him, eyes glistening. "I waited 12 years for someone who never came back," she said. "And yet somehow, you walked into my story when I'd stopped waiting altogether." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. And in that simple act, the waiting finally ended. Love, she learned that night, doesn't always come when we expect it, only when we're finally ready to receive it. A year later, Jane and Michael stood on the porch of their small countryside home. The sun hung low, painting the fields gold. Three children, Michael's, ran laughing through the grass, their voices mixing with birdsong. Jane watched them, one hand resting on her heart, the other holding Michael's. "Do you think love ever regrets coming late?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Maybe not. Maybe it just needed time to grow roots." And in that moment she understood. Her bloom had come, not the one she had waited 12 years for, but the one that had been quietly growing in her all along. They say time heals all wounds, but Jane now believed something deeper, that love teaches us how to live with the scars, until they bloom into something beautiful. And as the wind swept gently through the tall grass, she closed her eyes, feeling the peace she had been searching for all her life, a peace that finally stayed. The years that followed were neither entirely dark nor completely light, they were a strange, slow blend of both. Life didn't stop, it simply shifted its tone. Days came and went with the rhythm of survival, school runs, laughter in the kitchen, bills on the table, arguments that healed by morning, and dreams quietly adjusted to fit the times. There were birthdays where joy felt rehearsed, and Christmases where absence sat at the table like an uninvited guest. The hurt dulled but never left, it just learned to live beside us. In those years, we built new routines. Mom, always the unspoken hero, filled the silence with her strength. She taught us not just to endure, but to rebuild, to find purpose in the ordinary, to turn what remained into something that could grow again. And we did grow. Slowly, unevenly, but truthfully. We learned that healing doesn't announce itself. It creeps in through small moments, a smile that doesn't feel forced, a memory that doesn't sting as much, the day you realize you've stopped counting the years since then. The years between were not wasted. They were the soil, heavy, rough, and patient, that prepared the ground for what was to come. It didn't happen with fanfare. No thunder, no warning. Just an ordinary morning, the kind where sunlight slips through the curtains in quiet stripes, when a knock came at the door. We weren't expecting anyone. Years had taught us not to. Yet, when the door opened, time itself seemed to falter. There he was. Older. Smaller somehow. The man who once filled a room now stood uncertain on the doorstep, hat in hand, carrying the weight of years gone wrong. No one spoke at first. Silence stretched between us, not empty, but full of everything unsaid. Regret. Relief. Resentment. Recognition. He tried to smile, that same half-smile we used to know. But it trembled. I didn't know where else to go, he said quietly, voice roughened by distance and age. Mom didn't rush to him. She didn't turn away either. She just stood still, her eyes searching his face for something. Truth, maybe. Change. Forgiveness. I couldn't tell. And me. I felt everything at once, anger, curiosity, pity, and yet underneath it all, something I didn't expect, understanding. Because the years between had taught us that people are not defined by their leaving or their return, but by what they choose to do after. That day the house felt heavy again, but this time, not with grief. With possibility. Evening fell like an old memory, slow, golden, and uneasy. The house, once filled with the hum of old wounds, now sat in fragile stillness. We gathered around the same table that had witnessed so much, our laughter, our silence, our growing up without him. He spoke first. Words came haltingly, like a man wading through deep water. I thought I was doing what was best, he said. I thought leaving would fix things. I was wrong. Mom listened, not with softness, but with the calm of someone who had long stopped expecting an apology. Her hands were folded, her eyes steady. When she finally spoke, her voice carried both steel and mercy. You didn't just leave, you erased yourself, she said. We had to learn how to live without a shadow. And we did. For a long while, no one said anything. The only sound was the clock, steady, relentless, marking time we could never get back. Then something shifted. Maybe it was the tremor in his voice, or the way his shoulders sank when he said, "I missed everything." Maybe it was the years we'd spent learning that holding on to pain too tightly only chains you to the past. So we let him talk. About the places he'd been, the nights he'd thought of us, the moments he almost came back but didn't. And when he finished, there were tears, not of reconciliation, not yet, but of release. Forgiveness didn't arrive that night, but something else did. Peace. The quiet kind that settles in when you finally stop fighting the story and start accepting it. Later, when the house was dark and the others asleep, I stood by the window and realized, every ending isn't really an end. Sometimes it's just the truth arriving late, asking softly to be heard. And in that moment, I understood. The past may have broken us, but it also made room for something new, a chance to begin again, not as who we were, but as who we've become.